Can you imagine sitting in a courtroom, about to finalize the bitter end of your marriage, when your soon-to-be ex-wife walks in, 7 months pregnant, with a baby that absolutely, definitively cannot be yours? What would you do when faced with a betrayal so brazen, so calculated, it actually leaves you speechless? Honestly, I'm still reeling from the absolute circus that unfolded at my divorce hearing yesterday. I was sitting there, trying to keep my cool, going over paperwork with my attorney one last time. We'd been dragging this divorce out for months, and I just wanted it over. I wanted to move on with my life, to finally get some peace. That's when I saw my soon-to-be ex-wife, Sarah, walking down the courthouse hallway, and I literally did a double take. She was visibly pregnant, not just a little bump, but seriously showing, like 6 or 7 months along. She had on this tight, form-fitting dress that really accentuated her belly, and she was walking with both hands cradling her stomach, like she was protecting precious cargo. The look on her face? Pure triumph, like she'd just played the ultimate ace. My lawyer grabbed my arm, his voice a low whisper. "Did you know about this?" And I just stared, because what the actual hell was happening here? We hadn't been intimate since our separation over a year ago. So, unless this was some kind of miraculous virgin birth, something was seriously off. We went into the courtroom and took our seats. Sarah sat at the petitioner's table with her attorney, a slick-looking guy named Richardson, who I'd heard had a reputation for playing dirty. The entire time, she was making deliberate eye contact with me, that smug smile never leaving her face, all while rubbing her belly. It was an absolute performance. Judge Martinez came in, we all stood, went through the usual preliminaries. Then, Richardson immediately jumped up, asking to address the court about recent developments that significantly impact these proceedings. He gestured toward Sarah like she was a star witness in a homicide trial. "Your Honor, as you can clearly see, Mrs. Peterson is expecting. This pregnancy substantially changes the financial considerations in this case, particularly regarding spousal support and the division of assets." The judge raised her eyebrows, looking back and forth between Sarah and me. I could see the wheels turning in her head. Here's this pregnant woman whose husband is apparently trying to divorce her and leave her high and dry. Richardson continued, his tone getting increasingly accusatory. "Mr. Peterson has not only been attempting to minimize his financial obligations to his wife during these proceedings, but he is now trying to abandon his responsibilities to his unborn child." Mrs. Peterson informed him of this pregnancy during their last reconciliation attempt, which we believe directly precipitated his abrupt decision to file for divorce. That was a complete, outright lie. We never had any reconciliation attempt that involved a pregnancy, and she sure as hell never told me about any pregnancy. But Sarah? She just sat there looking like the picture of wounded motherhood, dabbing at her eyes with tissues, placing a protective hand over her stomach. And Richardson kept going. "Furthermore, this pregnancy has created serious health complications for Mrs. Peterson. She's been diagnosed with severe morning sickness and gestational hypertension, forcing her to reduce her work hours significantly. This medical situation makes it even more critical that Mr. Peterson provide adequate financial support for his family." Then Sarah spoke up, her voice soft, but carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "I just want what's best for our baby. I never expected him to react this way when I told him we were going to be parents. I felt like I'd been sucker punched straight in the gut." The judge was looking at me with obvious disapproval, probably thinking I was the worst kind of deadbeat dad. My attorney was scribbling notes frantically, writing paternity test ASAP, in all caps. Judge Martinez turned to me directly. "Mr. Peterson, were you aware of this pregnancy when you filed for divorce?" Before I could even answer, Richardson jumped in again. "Your Honor, he was absolutely aware. Mrs. Peterson informed him during their final attempt to save their marriage, which is what prompted his sudden filing for divorce. He couldn't handle the responsibility of impending fatherhood." That's when something inside me just snapped. I stood up, ignoring my lawyer, who was tugging at my sleeve, desperately trying to get me to sit back down. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling inside me. "With all due respect, I've had a vasectomy since August 2018. I have complete medical documentation right here, proving that I am sterile and cannot father children." The entire courtroom went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Sarah's triumphant expression froze on her face, then crumbled in real time like I was watching a building collapse in slow motion. Her attorney, Richardson, looked at her with complete shock and confusion, clearly realizing he'd been played, and played hard. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder I'd been carrying throughout these proceedings. I have the surgical records from Dr. Williams at Metro Medical Center, post-operative follow-up notes, and 2 separate seed count tests confirming the procedure's complete success. I am biologically incapable of being the father of that child. Richardson shot to his feet, looking flustered as hell. Your Honor, my client was never informed of any such procedure. This is clearly a desperate attempt by Mr. Peterson to evade his parental responsibilities. Judge Martinez held up her hand for silence and asked the bailiff to bring her my folder. She spent several minutes carefully examining each document. The courtroom remained completely quiet except for the rustle of pages. These records appear to be authentic and complete, she finally said. Mr. Peterson, when was this procedure performed? August 10th, 2018, Your Honor. I have the complete surgical report, billing records, and insurance documentation. I also have medical records documenting my genetic condition, Huntington's disease, which was the primary reason for my decision to undergo sterilization. Sarah was visibly shaking at this point, her face completely drained of color. Richardson leaned over to whisper something urgent to her, but she jerked away from him like he'd burned her. The judge looked directly at Sarah. Mrs. Peterson, were you aware your husband had undergone this procedure? Sarah struggled to stand, still holding her belly. He never told me. This is impossible. We were still intimate after that date. The timing doesn't make sense. Mrs. Peterson, I said quietly, my voice calm now, almost cutting. A vasectomy doesn't affect sexual function, only fertility. And yes, we were intimate during our brief reconciliation period in late 2018, which occurred 3 months after my procedure. Richardson quickly requested a recess, which the judge granted. As they huddled in intense conversation across the courtroom, my lawyer looked at me with a mixture of relief and pure exasperation. Jesus Christ, a heads up would have been nice, he muttered, shaking his head. That could have gone very badly if your documentation wasn't perfect. I never imagined she'd try something like this, I replied, still trying to process the absolute audacity of what had just happened. Attempting to pass off another man's child as mine in a court of law. That was beyond anything I thought she was capable of. Now, let me back up and explain how we got to this point, because this whole situation is completely screwed up. Sarah and I got married in 2015 after dating for 2 years. We met in 2013 at a work conference. I'm a software engineer. She works in corporate marketing. Everything was great at first. We had similar career ambitions, traveled together, bought a beautiful house in the suburbs, shared the same vision for success and financial security. The one area where we differed was on having children, but initially, it wasn't a major issue. Then, in early 2017, everything changed. I got diagnosed with Huntington's disease. If you don't know what that is, it's a degenerative neurological condition that's genetic. There's a 50% chance of passing it to biological children. I watched my father die from it when I was younger. I saw him deteriorate from a strong, active man to someone who couldn't walk, couldn't speak clearly, couldn't control his movements. He died at 52. I'm 34 now and already showing early symptoms, occasional hand tremors, some balance issues, minor cognitive stuff. When I got the test results confirming I had the gene, I was utterly devastated. I remember sitting in the neurologist's office, clutching that genetic screening report, as he explained what I was facing. That night, I told Sarah everything. The prognosis, the hereditary nature, my absolute terror about potentially passing this nightmare to a child. We have options, I told her, holding her hands across our kitchen table. Adoption, fostering, or maybe just focusing on our careers and traveling the world together. She squeezed my hands, tears in her eyes. We'll figure this out together, she said. Your health comes first right now. For almost a year, things seemed okay. We researched adoption agencies, spent time with her sister's kids, talked about maybe doing volunteer work with children instead of having our own. I truly thought we were on the same page. I was completely wrong. Around March 2018, Sarah started making comments about how genetics weren't everything and how medical science was advancing rapidly. She'd accidentally leave fertility clinic brochures around the house. When I'd remind her of our previous discussions, she'd get upset and say I was being pessimistic. "You're denying me the chance at motherhood," she said during one particularly brutal fight in our bedroom. She'd actually thrown a fertility pamphlet at me. "There are tests they can do now, ways to screen embryos before implantation. The testing isn't 100% accurate," I replied, trying to stay calm. "And even if it was, I'm not willing to risk it. Why is adoption suddenly off the table?" She turned away, arms crossed. "It's not the same thing. I want to experience pregnancy. I want a child that's genetically both of ours." The arguments escalated over the next few months. I'd come home from work to find her watching birthing videos on YouTube or browsing baby furniture websites. When I tried to discuss our previous agreements, she'd either break down crying or explode in anger. Then came the incident in July 2018 that changed everything forever. I was looking for a receipt on our shared laptop when I discovered she'd been researching ways to sabotage our birth control. There were Google searches for how to poke holes in rubbers without obvious damage and what happens if you skip birth control pills. She had calendar entries tracking her ovulation cycle with notes about optimal conception timing. The worst part was finding an open browser tab for a forum where she was asking other women for advice on getting pregnant when your husband doesn't want children. Someone had actually suggested getting me intoxicated enough that I wouldn't notice if protection wasn't used properly. Sarah had replied, "That might work. He never remembers details clearly when he drinks whiskey." I sat there for hours reading through weeks of her posts, feeling physically sick. This wasn't just a disagreement about family planning anymore. This was a fundamental violation of trust and bodily autonomy. I couldn't believe the woman I'd married was capable of plotting something so manipulative and deceptive. When Sarah came home that evening, I confronted her with what I'd discovered. I'll never forget how quickly her expression changed from shock at being caught to desperate justification. "You're overreacting," she said, pacing around our living room. "I was just venting online. People say things they don't really mean when they're frustrated." "Venting?" I asked, my voice raw. "You were actively planning to trick me into fatherhood by sabotaging our birth control. That's reproductive coercion, Sarah." That's when she completely broke down, collapsing onto our couch in tears. "I'm desperate," she sobbed. "I'm turning 34 next year. My biological clock is ticking while you keep stalling and making excuses." "I'm not stalling or making excuses. I have a genetic disease that I refuse to risk passing to a child. We discussed this extensively. You'd come around once a baby was actually on the way," she insisted, wiping her tears. "You'd love our child no matter what health issues they might have. I just need to help you see what you really want deep down." I slept in the guest room that night, unable to even look at her. The next morning, I called my doctor and scheduled a consultation for a vasectomy. I didn't tell Sarah about it, not out of spite, but out of pure self-preservation. I couldn't trust her anymore, and I needed to ensure I wouldn't be forced into parenthood against my will through deception or coercion. The procedure was scheduled for August 2018 while Sarah was visiting her sister for a long weekend. My doctor was completely supportive, especially given my genetic condition and the circumstances. The surgery itself was quick and straightforward, local anesthesia, small incisions, about 30 minutes total. Recovery was minimal, just some ice packs and mild discomfort for a few days. I took 3 days off work, telling Sarah I had a major project deadline and would be working from home anyway. When she returned from her sister's place, I was planning to tell her about the vasectomy and suggest we start marriage counseling to work through our fundamental disagreements about children and trust. But the night she came back, she completely blindsided me with her own announcement. "I think we should separate," she said over dinner, not even making eye contact. "I've already spoken with a divorce attorney about our options." I was stunned. "Sarah, what are you talking about? I know we've been having problems, but what's there to work through?" She interrupted coldly. "You won't give me children, and I can't waste my remaining fertile years on someone who will never change his mind about this." She said it so matter-of-factly, like she'd been rehearsing the speech. There was no emotion, no sadness about ending our marriage, just cold calculation about her biological timeline. I didn't mention the vasectomy that night. It seemed pointless since we were apparently heading for divorce anyway, and I was still processing the whiplash of her sudden decision. We spent the following weeks discussing logistics, how to divide assets, who would move out of the house, whether to try mediation or go straight to attorneys. It was all very civil but tense, like we were business partners dissolving a company rather than spouses ending a marriage. Then, completely inexplicably, in November 2018, about 2 months after she'd first mentioned divorce, Sarah showed up at my apartment wanting to reconcile. She arrived with takeout from our favorite restaurant and tears in her eyes. "I've been thinking," she said as we sat awkwardly at my tiny kitchen table. "Maybe I can accept a childless marriage if that's what it takes to save us. We built a good life together. I don't want to throw that away over something that might not even matter in the long run." I was suspicious, but willing to try. 7 years together isn't something you discard easily, especially when you still care about someone despite everything that's happened. We agreed to start couples counseling, and I moved back into our house in December 2018. For almost 10 months, things genuinely seemed better. We went to weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Rodriguez, who helped us communicate more effectively. We reconnected physically and emotionally. We started talking about travel plans and career goals. Again, I came close to telling her about the vasectomy several times, but the right moment never seemed to present itself. As more time passed, it became increasingly difficult to bring up, especially since our relationship was finally improving. Then in September 2019, Sarah's phone started buzzing constantly while she was in the shower. Normally, I would never check her messages. That's a serious violation of privacy. But after the birth control sabotage incident, I still had lingering trust issues. I glanced at her screen and saw text messages from Marcus W. with preview text that made my stomach drop. "Miss you too, baby. Can't wait until I get back, and we can." I knew Marcus Wilson was her direct supervisor at work. Against my better judgment and every principle I had about respecting privacy, I opened the messages. What I found completely shattered any hope of saving our marriage. Not only were they having an affair, but based on their conversation history going back months, it had been ongoing for over 2 years. They'd been sleeping together since early 2017, before my Huntington's diagnosis, before all our arguments about having children, before she threatened divorce the first time. As I scrolled back through months of their messages, the timeline became sickeningly clear. Their affair had continued throughout all our fertility struggles, through her manipulative attempts to get pregnant, through her initial divorce threats, and even during our reconciliation period. The reconciliation, I realized with a punch to the gut, had started in November 2018, which coincided perfectly with Marcus being transferred to their London office for a 9-month assignment. She had essentially put me on hold while her primary relationship was temporarily unavailable. When Sarah came out of the bathroom, I was sitting on our bed holding her phone. The look of absolute panic on her face told me everything I needed to know. "How long have you been sleeping with Marcus?" I asked quietly, my voice barely a whisper. The color drained completely from her face. "Listen, I can explain. 2 years, Sarah. You've been having an affair for 2 years while making me feel like a selfish monster for not wanting to risk passing a genetic disease to our children." My voice cracked as the full scope of her betrayal hit me. "You threatened to divorce me because I wouldn't give you a baby, then came crawling back when he got transferred overseas." She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she attempted to justify everything. Marcus understood her need for children in ways I never could. Marcus would have been willing to start a family with her. Marcus appreciated her femininity and maternal instincts while I just saw her as a business partner. It was complete BS, but it told me everything about who she really was. I filed for divorce the next morning. This time, there was absolutely no turning back. The legal proceedings were contentious from day one. Sarah wanted our house, which I'd largely paid for using inheritance money from my grandmother. She demanded half of my retirement accounts and substantial monthly alimony despite having a well-paying job herself. Her attorney painted me as emotionally abusive and selfish, citing my refusal to have children as evidence of my controlling and uncaring nature. 4 months into the divorce process, we reached the hearing that would determine temporary asset allocation while the divorce moved forward. And that's when Sarah decided to play her pregnancy card. After I revealed the vasectomy and provided medical documentation, Judge Martinez was clearly pissed off. She told Richardson that attempting to falsely attribute paternity was a serious matter that could constitute perjury and grounds for court sanctions. "You have 48 hours to submit a revised petition that accurately reflects your client's circumstances," she told Richardson sternly. "And Mrs. Peterson, I strongly advise you to be completely forthright in all future filings with this court. Attempting to mislead the court about paternity issues is grounds for contempt charges. In the hallway afterwards, Sarah tried to approach me, her makeup streaked with tears. Please, just let me explain, she pleaded, but Richardson physically steered her toward the exit while whispering something that made her stop struggling to reach me. That was 3 days ago, and since then, my phone has been absolutely blowing up. 43 calls from Sarah, plus countless text messages ranging from tearful apologies to vicious accusations. She's alternately claimed that I tricked her by getting the vasectomy secretly, that the baby might somehow still be mine despite medical impossibility, and finally that she made horrible mistakes, but we could still work everything out if I just talked to her. Marcus, meanwhile, has apparently gone completely radio silent since she told him about the courtroom disaster. According to a mutual acquaintance who works at their company, he immediately took extended personal leave and has been making inquiries about permanent transfer opportunities overseas. The week following the hearing brought additional developments. Richardson formally withdrew as Sarah's legal representation. Apparently, he'd never been informed about the pregnancy deception beforehand and wanted nothing to do with continuing the case after being blindsided in court like that. Sarah quickly retained new counsel, some attorney with a reputation for aggressive tactics, but significantly less respect in the local legal community. My lawyer filed for an expedited divorce process based on attempted fraud, which Judge Martinez granted. Instead of the year-long proceedings we'd been expecting, we got a final hearing date just 6 weeks out. 2 days before that final hearing, I got an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Sarah's sister, Jessica, who I'd always gotten along with well, and who'd tried to stay neutral during our separation. I owe you an apology, she said, sitting stiffly on my couch and declining my offer of coffee. Sarah told me you knew about the pregnancy and were abandoning her. I believed her story. What changed your mind? I asked. She finally admitted everything yesterday. The affair with Marcus, trying to trick you into having children during your marriage, deliberately getting pregnant by Marcus while planning to pass the child off as yours to get a better divorce settlement. Jessica shook her head in disgust. She calculated that if the court believed the baby was yours, she'd secure much more favorable financial terms and ongoing child support payments. And Marcus? I asked. He wants absolutely nothing to do with her or the baby. Apparently, he never wanted children either. That was part of why she was having problems with both of you. When your attorney sent his lawyer copies of the court transcripts, she trailed off meaningfully. Let's just say he's not stepping up to take responsibility. The final divorce hearing was mercifully straightforward. With Sarah's deception fully exposed and documented, Judge Martinez was completely unsympathetic to her demands. She received no alimony whatsoever, only her fair share of assets we'd acquired jointly during the marriage. I kept the house, my retirement accounts, and my grandmother's jewelry that Sarah had tried to claim as marital property. As we left the courthouse for the final time, Sarah, now visibly 8 months pregnant, made one last desperate attempt to change my mind. Please, she said, catching my arm in the parking lot. I know I made terrible mistakes, but this baby is going to need a father figure, and we were good together once upon a time. I gently removed her hand from my arm. I'm sure Marcus will step up once paternity is legally established, and he realizes he can't just run away from his responsibilities. He won't, she whispered, her voice breaking. He's already accepted a permanent transfer to their Singapore office. Then I'm genuinely sorry for your situation, I told her, my voice firm. But it's not my responsibility to fix the mess you created. I hope things work out for you and your child, but our story is completely finished. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized, and I've heard through mutual friends that Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She moved back to her hometown to live with her parents since she can't afford the apartment she'd been renting on her reduced salary. Marcus apparently sends minimal child support payments, but has no plans to return from overseas or establish any kind of relationship with his son. As for me, I'm actually doing pretty well. I've started working with a new neurologist who specializes in Huntington's disease, and he's optimistic about several experimental treatments that might slow the progression of symptoms. I've kept the house, but I've done extensive renovations to make it fully accessible for when my condition eventually worsens. Ramps, wider doorways, grab bars, that kind of thing. The most unexpected positive outcome has been connecting with a support group for people with Huntington's who chose not to have biological children for the same reasons I did. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I have to defend that decision or feel guilty about it. I'm just at peace with the choice I made. Looking back now, I can clearly see the warning signs I ignored early on. Sarah often made comments when we talked about other people's issues that should have stood out. She always sided with the manipulator, saying things like, "You have to fight for what you want," or "Sometimes people need help seeing what's best." At the time, I thought she was just opinionated. But really, those words showed how she saw the world. Her courtroom pregnancy stunt made me realize just how planned everything was. She didn't just show up pregnant by chance. It was calculated. The tight dress, the way she held her stomach, the fake tears ready on cue, and her lawyer's speech about abandonment and health risks. It was all staged to paint me as the villain and win her money. What hurts most is that she dragged an innocent baby into it. That child will grow up knowing his mother tried to claim he was another man's son for money while his real father ran off overseas. He didn't ask for this, but he'll carry it forever. My support group has been a lifeline. 12 of us meet once a month, all dealing with Huntington's and the hard choices around it. Hearing their stories opened my eyes to the fact that what Sarah did was misuse. Others went through similar things with partners who refused to respect their decisions and used pressure or tricks to get their way. Dr. Chun, my neurologist, has been more than a doctor, he's been a guide. He's helped me see that my choice wasn't only medically sound, but also the right thing to do ethically. He's seen how this disease rips families apart, kids growing up afraid they'll face the same fate. He's studying the mental toll of genetic counseling and even asked me to join his research interviews. Working on the house has been healing. Adding ramps, a roll-in shower, and lower counters isn't about giving up. It's about facing reality. Sarah used to get mad whenever I brought up wheelchair access, calling me negative. But preparing isn't quitting, it's taking charge. I've gone back to things I gave up during the marriage. I picked up the guitar again after Sarah used to complain about the noise. I joined a hiking group that does accessible trails, which helps with both fitness and making new friends. I'm even thinking about getting a dog, something she always said no to because of the furniture. Sometimes I wonder how life might have been if we had been honest from the start. If I had told her right away about the vasectomy. If she had admitted she'd never consider options other than having her own kids. If she hadn't been cheating for years while pretending we were fixing things. But thinking about what-ifs leads nowhere. The real lesson is that you have to live in truth, even when it's hard or uncomfortable. No more hiding. No more giving up core values. No more ties built on lies and control. My life isn't easy now. My health is still uncertain, and some days the symptoms are scary. But at least I live on solid ground built on honesty. Something that was missing the whole time I was married. Sometimes the best ending isn't the dream you had in mind. Sometimes it's the quiet peace of standing in your truth when it matters most. It's a lot to process, even now. I keep wondering. If you were in my shoes, facing that kind of calculated betrayal and manipulation, when would you have drawn your line in the sand? Let me know in the comments below.